do I qualify? Will I be able to immigrate to Canada?
A big specialty of mine as well, helping the spouses or common law partners reunite in Canada.
Why would one choose to go with someone who is professional?
And I have extremely high rate of success for reconsiderations. For like, let's say 10 years or more, they would tell you like how many times they've seen officers make errors. You studied for 2 years, you get a 3-year postgraduate work permit, and you really have to do everything possible.
ਸਾਂਝਾ ਟੀਵੀ ਵੇਖਦੇ ਵੀਰਸ ਦਾ ਸਵਾਗਤ ਹੈ। ਅੱਜ ਦੇ ਖਾਸ ਮੁਲਾਕਾਤ ਵਿੱਚ ਮੈਂ ਹਾਂ ਤੁਹਾਡੀ ਆਪਣੀ ਸੁਖੀ। ਜਿੱਦਾਂ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਜਾਣਦੇ ਆ, ਕੈਨੇਡਾ ਨੇ ਆਪਣੇ ਦਰਵਾਜ਼ੇ ਖੁੱਲ੍ਹੇ ਹੋਏ ਆ ਇਮੀਗ੍ਰੈਂਟਸ ਵਾਸਤੇ, ਤੇ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਪਿਛਲਾ ਸਾਲ ਸੀ ਇੱਕ ਰੈਕੋਰਡ ਬ੍ਰੇਕਿੰਗ ਹਿਸਟਰੀ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ 4,31,000 ਇਮੀਗ੍ਰੈਂਟਸ ਕੈਨੇਡਾ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਆਏ। ਤੇ ਖੁਸ਼ਖਬਰੀ ਇਹ ਆ ਕਿ ਆਟੋਆ ਇਸ ਤੋਂ ਵੀ ਉੱਤੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਇਮੀਗ੍ਰੈਂਟਸ ਆ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਬੁਲਾਉਣ ਨੂੰ ਕੈਨੇਡਾ ਫਿਰਦੇ ਆ। ਸੋ ਕਿਵੇਂ ਇਹ ਨੰਬਰਸ 2025 ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ 5 ਲੱਖ ਤੱਕ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਜਾਣੇ ਆ। ਜੀ ਹਾਂ, 5 ਲੱਖ ਇਮੀਗ੍ਰੈਂਟਸ ਕੈਨੇਡਾ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਆ ਕੇ PR ਰਾਹੀਂ ਇੱਥੇ ਪੱਕੇ ਹੋ ਸਕਦੇ ਆ। ਸੋ ਕਿਵੇਂ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਕੀ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਪ੍ਰੋਸੈਸ ਆ, ਕੀ ਇਮੀਗ੍ਰੇਸ਼ਨ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਚੇਂਜਸ ਆ ਰਹੇ ਆ, ਕੀ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਸੌਖਾ ਕੀਤਾ ਜਾਂ ਹੋਰ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਡਿਫਿਕਲਟ ਕੀਤਾ ਹੋਇਆ ਆ, ਉਹਦੇ ਬਾਰੇ ਅੱਜ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਇੱਕ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਇਮੀਗ੍ਰੇਸ਼ਨ ਕੰਸਲਟੈਂਟ ਸਪੈਸ਼ਲਿਸਟ ਹੈਗੇ ਉਹ ਸਾਡੇ ਨਾਲ ਜੁੜੇ ਹੋਏ ਆ। ਸਕਾਈਪ ਰਾਹੀਂ ਅਸੀਂ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਨਾਲ ਜੋੜਨ ਲੱਗੇ ਆ। ਤੇ ਇਹ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਇੰਟਰਵਿਊ ਅੰਗਰੇਜ਼ੀ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਹੋਊਗੀ, ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਜੇ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਕੈਨੇਡਾ ਆਉਣਾ ਆ ਅੰਗਰੇਜ਼ੀ ਆਉਣੀ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਬਹੁਤ ਜ਼ਰੂਰੀ ਆ। ਸੋ ਪੈਨ ਤੇ ਪੇਪਰ ਆਪਣੇ ਰੈਡੀ ਰੱਖੋ ਤੇ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਆਹ ਜਾਣਕਾਰੀ ਅਸੀਂ ਦੇਣ ਜਾ ਰਹੇ ਹਾਂ। ਸੋ ਆਓ ਆਪਾਂ ਰਲ ਕੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਅੱਜ ਦੇ ਗੈਸਟ ਆ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਸਵਾਗਤ ਕਰੀਏ। ਇਮੀਗ੍ਰੇਸ਼ਨ ਐਡਵਾਈਜ਼ਿੰਗ ਕੈਨੇਡਾ ਕੰਪਨੀ ਦਾ ਨਾਮ ਹੈਗਾ ਤੇ ਉੱਥੋਂ ਦੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਸੀਨੀਅਰ ਇਮੀਗ੍ਰੇਸ਼ਨ ਕੰਸਲਟੈਂਟ ਹੈਗੇ ਆ, CEO ਵੀ ਹੈਗੇ ਇਸ ਕੰਪਨੀ ਦੇ। ਅੱਜ ਸਾਡੇ ਨਾਲ ਮਰੀਆ ਅਲੈਕਸੀਵਾ ਜੁੜੇ ਹੋਏ ਆ। ਸੋ ਆਓ ਰਲ ਕੇ ਆਪਾਂ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਤੋਂ ਜਾਣਕਾਰੀ ਲਈਏ। Maria, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us today on Sanjha TV show Khas Mulakat. Can you tell us a little bit more about your background and how long you've been practicing law? Because we have a lot of excited and eager people wanting to know how they can immigrate to Canada.
For sure, I'm very happy to be here and thank you guys for inviting me. So I became licensed as an immigration consultant in 2014. And prior to that, I was actually an international student myself. So I came to Canada back in 2006, studied, got my bachelor's degree, applied for Canadian Experience Class program, and my application was refused because an officer made an error.
Oh no.
And I didn't realize that right away, but I researched it deeply and I understood that the officer clearly made an error. I made a very strong argument. And my background is Bachelor of Philosophy, so I was very good at making arguments and proving my point. And the officer apologized and said, I'm sorry, I did make an error. Here's your PR. And that really got me excited that, if I've done this, I could really stand up for other immigrants and help them. And I realized it was my true passion, so I went and I studied to be an immigration consultant. And since 2014, I'm licensed. But if you think about it, my experience began even before 2014, right? It began with my own immigration path. And since then, I've pretty much been focusing on young professionals, international students who are in Canada, some families who want to immigrate from overseas, and it's been quite a journey, over 10 years, pretty much.
That's great. So you must get, questions left, right, and center. And I think the main question always is do I qualify? Will I be able to immigrate to Canada? So if we start off with a little checklist, what are some of the questions you ask, someone residing in a different country to see if they're, to filter out whether they are eligible to come to Canada?
So recently, based on what I'm seeing happening with economic immigration, let's say if you look at what are the most popular programs, right? I always recommend to look at 3 pathways. One, through coming to Canada as a student. This is probably the most popular one.
Right.
95% of my clients first came to study, they got a job, did a language test, and they chose one of the economic immigration pathways that suited their situation and they immigrated. And a second one is some people are able to come to Canada directly after getting a job offer. that's more rare to be able to get a job offer, and you have to be cautious how you do that.
Right.
But that's, I guess, second popular way of how people immigrate. And third would be spousal sponsorship. So there's lots of Canadian citizens, permanent residents who get married overseas and then they sponsor their spouse, and that's been a big specialty of mine as well, helping the spouses or common law partners reunite in Canada.
Okay. As I was sort of telling our viewers in the beginning in my introduction that Canada and Ottawa especially is looking to hike up those numbers of immigrants coming to Canada, with almost close to 500,000, PRs that they're going to be giving out in, say, 2025. Why is Canada benefiting from immigrants right now? Why do they want more immigrants to come into Canada?
Yeah. So yeah, it's a very good question. I think the biggest reason why Canadian immigration is expanding their quotas is because they're looking ahead, and what they're seeing is that the baby boomers in Canada are retiring.
Right.
And there's simply not enough young professionals who are Canadians and permanent residents to replace all those vacancies that we're going to have in the next, you name it, 5 to 10 years. Mm-hmm. And it's becoming very, very apparent. We're starting to sense it. We're starting to sense that there's lots of vacancies, perhaps, but not enough people who are looking for jobs, who are like unemployed, right? The unemployment rate a few months ago has been one of the highest in history. So it is a thing that the government of Canada is looking to expand its population through getting more immigrants, and the birth rate in Canada has been declining. So if so many people are retiring, the birth rate is declining, it just makes sense to really fulfill the economic needs for migration, right?
Right. Maria, why would one choose to hire an immigration consultant versus something like what you did yourself? You were able to apply for it yourself and go online. Why would one choose to go with someone who is professional and well-versed, who's got, say 10 plus years of experience like yourself, versus doing it themselves?
Mm-hmm. Very good question. I love this question. I even have some helpful videos on that on my YouTube channel, my Instagram. I never am the person who is like, you have to hire an immigration consultant, you can't do it. I'm very transparent and honest. I did it myself, so it's doable. The question is, do you have enough time? Do you have enough research skills and confidence to do it yourself? I thought I had. And to be honest, the reason why immigration officer made an error is because I confused him a little bit. Okay. So if my file was a lot more straightforward and better prepared, I don't think the officer would have made an error.
And there wouldn't have been a delay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, now as an immigration consultant, I really make it a point to spell everything out for the officer. So when he's looking at my client's file, he can't even be confused because I spell it out for him. Some officers are brand new, they don't know the system well. So if I'm there to really reference all the important regulations that apply, or let's say my client has some complicated situation, something not standard, I really make an argument why he still fits into the criteria that government is looking at, right? And that really prevents officers making errors. However, trust me, they still do.
Right.
Any immigration consultant who's been working for let's say 10 years or more, they would tell you how many times they've seen officers make errors. It's just unavoidable, and I'm right there to support the client and to apply for consideration. And I have extremely high rate of success for reconsiderations, even for refusals. Sometimes officers refuse an error, and there's I meant for refusals, right? But there's even situations when the files get canceled, and I was able to argue that they were canceled for the wrong reason, and the file was restored. So that's definitely one of the reasons why you should hire an immigration consultant, is just to have that extra support in case things go wrong. Someone knowledgeable with great experience, who can make strong arguments, can support you, right? But at the same time, if let's say your case is very straightforward, There's no complications. You have time to sit down, look at all the guides, because whatever you see in the government checklist is often not comprehensive. So you have to have the research skills to go to actual immigration guides, which are sometimes many, many, many pages long.
Right.
And you have to make sure you didn't miss anything. Because let's say the regular guide might not say, let's say you have a spouse who died, you need to show death certificate, but it's part of the completeness checklist for certain applications. And if you don't provide it, government cancels your whole file.
Right.
So, and that's not in the standard checklist. You have to see that in the guide, right? So that's just a small example, but there's plenty out there where you can see that you really need to, you really need to be sure you have enough time to do everything right yourself.
Great.
If you don't have the time, then, you know, a good way is to hire someone experienced, reliable.
Great. When it comes to hiring consultants, and I'm going to speak about India, as most of our viewers are from there and probably tuned in watching, we hear a lot of horror stories. We see a lot of false promises. We see big boards saying, you know, pay this amount of money and you're guaranteed to get into Canada. And whether that is through job letters that are false, you know, through different ways of maneuvering and getting, giving up false hopes. And there's a lot of students, a lot of people that are paying, thousands and thousands of dollars out of their pocket, and they're still not being able or not being accepted into Canada. Maria, tell me some about the horror stories and tell me something about these false promises.
So you have to take responsibility for your own immigration journey, and you should know not to fall prey to something that looks too good, because Canada is not an easy country to get into. And no matter how much money you pay, there's never a guarantee, and you run a risk of failing completely, because government will find out, and government often finds out that what you did is fraudulent. So first of all, what you need to understand, immigration consultants, immigration lawyers, agents, nobody is allowed legally to charge you money for a job offer. So literally people message me, can you provide me with a job offer and I'll pay you? I'm like, that's illegal. There's strict regulation that forbids me to do that. And I can lose my license if I do that. So often the people who do it are not even licensed, and trust me, licensed people do it too, unfortunately. So you really have to understand, like, there's no easy way. You pay, get a job offer. Some people, I've heard like 100,000 for a job offer, and then the person comes and they're like, oh, sorry, the company closed.
Oh, no.
There's nothing we can do, and the person is left with like spending 100,000 for nothing.
And they've got no way to, recover that money.
Canada.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. And now when we talk about, ways to come to Canada, I mean, where does one start? What information do they need to gather? Is it important that they are studying, that they know the language? What are some of the prerequisites for them to get in? And let's hope, and, that's the right track. That's without the easy entry, without paying somebody, hundreds of thousands of dollars, just for job letters. What are the requirements? What are the prereqs to begin with?
Yeah, so I always say that no matter at what point you are, there's always something you could do. Sometimes it'll require you to, let's say, learn French, something complicated, but it's never a harsh no, undoable, right? Sometimes you have to put a lot of effort and find a job. And I have stories where, let's say, the person had a goal, he wasn't eligible, he consulted with me, he realized what is required for him to be eligible, and he took a couple years. It took a lot of effort from him, and he got there, right? So what I'm trying to say is that the requirements are quite high, but if you want to immigrate, you should do things right. And if you put a lot of effort into it, you can reach what is required. Now, what is required? Canada is looking for educated people with, let's say, at least bachelor's degree, master's degree is even more preferable. Canada is looking at high language proficiency, and based on most recent news, the government of Canada is actually going to target bilingual potential immigrants, so those who speak both English and French. That's, to me, almost like a guarantee. If you speak both English and French, there's no way we're not going to be able to find you a program. It might be still requiring you to come first to work or study, sometimes even without that, if you're highly educated and young. Now, Canada does allocate more points for those who are younger than 30. If you're older than 30, it doesn't mean it's 100% no, but it does become more difficult, and I have to be honest and straight up, right?
Okay, right.
So if you're older than 30, sometimes you have to look at perhaps maybe you can start a business in Canada or still come to study in Canada, right? There are ways. I have clients who came to study in Canada in their 40s, and they're already immigrants right now.
Okay.
Yeah, so my point is it's doable. You need to have proper legal advice, and don't fall prey to anything that sounds too good to be true.
Because it probably is.
Yes.
Right.
And there's pretty much nothing I can think of where, let's say, you immigrate to Canada without a job offer, without studying. Like if you hear any promises that you get your immigration without a job offer or without first studying in Canada, the only one is like if you speak both French and English, you're really young, you have a master's degree, then yes, you can migrate directly to Canada.
Right. Thank you so much for clearing up those misconceptions, because sometimes, like you said, it's probably too good to be true, and that's going to save you a lot of money in the long run. So what I kind of got from your last sort of explanation is that if you're still quite young and if you can also learn French, that might almost be like a guaranteed in, because obviously Canada is looking for bilingual speaking people.
Yes, if you can score high proficiency, if you can score high levels of English proficiency on CELPIP or IELTS test, and I would say above average on French, then your points are going to be like 500 something in express entry. If you also have master's degree and you're young, right? That's pretty much the easiest pathway right now. I mean, it's not easy because you have to learn French, but it's easier because you don't have to invest in education or find a job offer, right? That's how I see it.
So it's 2023 now. What are some of the changes, or new laws that are coming into play for immigration to Canada? What are some of the changes that you see that are going to be coming that may make it more difficult for immigrants to come to Canada, or perhaps even more easier?
A lot of changes are happening in 2023. First of all, in November of 2022, government introduced a brand new occupation system. I'm still getting used to it. It doesn't change too much, but it's just like you have to get used to it. And then they did introduce 16 new occupations that are now a part of express entry, so it's a great thing.
Yeah.
There's more occupations that can participate. They took away a couple, and then what we are patiently waiting for is the new rules that are coming into force in terms of express entry points. So express entry selection system is the main economic immigration program for Canada, right? There's plenty of provincial programs, but the main one is express entry. And in this system, the government of Canada qualifies you and allocates points based on your education, work experience, whether you have a job offer, your level of English, your age, and a few other factors, right? So they're looking at completely restructuring this system, perhaps. And they're also introducing a new system of targeting people. And just last week, they announced who they're going to target. It's still a tentative proposition. It's not set in stone yet, but they did mention that they're going to be targeting people with certain work experience in Canada in certain occupations. They're going to be targeting former international students. So if you studied in Canada, perhaps you could be lucky and your profile will be targeted because you are a former international student. They will be targeting temporary foreign workers who came under temporary foreign worker program. So that's people who have employer-specific work permits. And they're going to be definitely targeting French speakers. In terms of French speakers, just yesterday I got an email that government is actually going to advertise. Can you imagine the government of Canada is going to invest in advertising express entry economic immigration for French speakers? That's how in need Canada is of bilingual specialists. So that's like I've never seen that before, where government of Canada is going to run ads to attract certain type of immigrants. So that's very interesting.
That is. A quick question, since you kind of, touched on, express entry. What do you think of express entry and scores? Could the scores go down? Are people below 450 score? Do they have any hope?
Great question. I get it all the time. Now, I need a little bit more time to answer that question, just because once the targeted draws start, it's really difficult to predict how the overall cutoff score is going to be affected. My expectation is that government is still going to have regular general draws. Okay. But because there will be these separate targeted draws, perhaps the cutoff score is gonna not be really going down that fast. So 450, I would be a little bit concerned that it's not enough. That's my opinion, but I could be wrong, and I pray to God I'm wrong.
Right. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of people that are just sitting on the sidelines, and they need that little bit of boost, and it's hard to get. So, I mean, obviously that gives them a little bit of anxiety, and we get that question all the time.
Yeah, and the best thing I can recommend is look at really investing into your language proficiency. If you have 450, most likely your language proficiency is not top. So I'm speaking just about one, let's say English, right? If you top up your English score to over CELPIP 9, in most cases, like you will have more than 450, but I mean, I guess it depends on your age and other factors, right?
Right.
And by the way, I am an official partner of CELPIP. That's the official, and I do regular live streams, and I also do they do partner with me to do regular promotions where you can buy free self-test materials. It's usually valid for like less than 24 hours after I live stream.
Right,
so if you follow me and you participate in these live streams, you will get a chance to get free access to self-pip test preparation material. There's even a way to book a free self-pip test. Not free, I call it almost free. There is a partnership for which you get $280 compensated out of your 300 self-pip test cost. And right now, self-pip test centers are opening more and more in India. There's plenty of them in Canada. A lot of people do report that, self-pip is easier for immigration for them. It depends, because some people still find IELTS easier. It's really personal preference. But yeah, I just thought that it would be very helpful, useful information to announce.
Great, and we definitely want to hear more about your live streams, and we'll get that information at the end of the show about your social media handles where one can find it, because I myself was looking through it, and there seems like there's a lot of helpful, useful information for free that you give out to people that are interested. Now, tell me something, Marie. Obviously, we're going to have a lot of our viewers are going to be tuned in worldwide, and do you have any Punjabi-speaking staff on your premises that work at Immigration Advice in Canada, because a lot of people feel more comfortable speaking their language when it comes to getting advice?
I apologize, it cut off for a second, but I think you're asking about if I have staff that speaks Punjabi? Or...
Yes.
Yes, okay. So it's a good question. Lots of people ask me, do you have staff that speaks Spanish, Portuguese? And I do cater to people from all over the world. And really, if your English is not of a high level of proficiency, you're a little bit too far from immigration. So it is one of the main requirements for immigration. So I don't really put a lot of effort into hiring. I do have staff that speak other languages, but I don't have anyone who speaks Punjabi. And from what I understand, if you are, let's say, from India, English is one of the very, very, I would say everybody speaks English almost, right? So you should be looking at improving your level of English proficiency if you're interested in immigrating to Canada. That's like step number one.
Great, yeah. So don't let English, non-English be a deterrent. You should actually be using that for your advantage to speak to somebody in that language, especially if you want to immigrate to Canada. My next question is, we've sort of touched on express entry. Let's talk a little bit about post-graduation work permit, like PGWP. Tell me a little bit more about how long those permits are valid for, and what kind of the requirements are. And I hear all the time that they're only valid for a certain amount of time, and if you don't get into renewing it, there's people just waiting forever because of the backlogs. What's the situation around that?
So the government of Canada has been really nice for the past couple of years, and they allowed former international students who had postgraduate work permit that expired within a certain date, period. They allowed them to extend it for a year, for a year and a half. Now there's no current policy that would allow international students to extend their postgraduate work permits. And so that means, let's say, if you studied for 2 years, you get a 3-year postgraduate work permit, and you really have to do everything possible in those 3 years in order to apply for immigration and succeed. And 3 years is a lot of time. Now, if you come to Canada and study only for 1 year, you get only 1-year work permit. And that can become an issue because oftentimes that's just not enough time, especially with how high express entry score is right now. So there are people who are a little bit stuck. I am trying to actually reach out to the government of Canada in the next couple of weeks. So if you're one of those people, message me. I might get your story. I'm trying to reach out and ask government to extend the policy, since in my opinion, it's not fair. The express entry score is still very high. They extended that policy because express entry score was high, but the policy ended in 2022, December 31st. So now there's still so many people whose work permit is expiring in 2023. And the cutoff score is so high, right? So I think it's fair if the government extends it. So who knows? Hopefully.
That's great. Thank you so much for advocating on their behalf. It's nice to have a voice like you reach out and speak to them and voice these concerns. Maria, at the end, you did again touch base on your Instagram live streams that you do. If you could go over contact information, your social media handles if one wants to get in touch with you as well, and the best way to contact you in your office.
For sure. So if you go to my website, immigrationadvising.com, just click on book consultation, and you can select any option, and we will have a Zoom video consultation. You can get the recording, or we can have a WhatsApp consultation. And in terms of live streams, I do regular, very helpful live streams on my Instagram. So follow immigration.services.canada and watch out. I always announce when's the next live stream and what it is about. And even if you just go to my page and watch a couple of live streams before the consultation, that's often helpful, since you will come with a better awareness of what's happening, what your chances are, and then you'll have more useful questions. You'll have a more useful use of my time, I would say, right?
Definitely.
Versus like asking too general questions, right? So yeah, I had recommended you guys to do that.
Thank you so much, Maria. Speaking to you, I found that everything was very on point and very informative, and I'm sure anyone that reaches out to you to hire you and to be a client is going to get the best service and care. We look forward to having you back periodically with more updates to the rules and regulations that have been changing for Immigration Canada. And again, thank you for taking time out to join us today.
Thank you. It was my pleasure, and I hope you guys succeed in everything you plan to do in regards to immigrating to Canada. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Maria. ਉਮੀਦ ਕਰਦੀ ਅੱਜ ਦਾ ਸ਼ੋਅ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਸਾਰਿਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਪਸੰਦ ਆਇਆ ਹੋਵੇਗਾ। ਥੋੜੀ ਜਿਹੀ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਇਨਫੋਰਮੇਸ਼ਨ ਇੰਗਲਿਸ਼ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਮਿਲੀ ਆ ਕੀ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਲਾਜ਼ ਆ ਕਾਫੀ ਕੁਝ ਬਦਲਿਆ 2023 ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ। ਸੋ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਵੀ ਅੱਜ ਹੀ ਇਮੀਗ੍ਰੇਸ਼ਨ ਐਡਵਾਈਜ਼ਿੰਗ ਕੈਨੇਡਾ ਨੂੰ ਸੰਪਰਕ ਕਰੋ। ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਵੈਬਸਾਈਟ ਤੇ ਜਾਓ ਤੇ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨਾਲ ਇੱਕ ਕੰਸਲਟੇਸ਼ਨ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਬੁੱਕ ਕਰ ਸਕਦੇ ਆ। ਉਸ ਤੋਂ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਇੰਸਟਾਗ੍ਰਾਮ ਦੇ ਉੱਤੇ ਲਾਈਵ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਸੈਮੀਨਾਰਸ ਹੁੰਦੇ ਆ ਉੱਥੋਂ ਥੋੜਾ ਜਿਹਾ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਹੋਰ ਇਨਫੋਰਮੇਸ਼ਨ ਮਿਲੂਗਾ, ਤਾਂ ਕਿ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਉੱਥੋਂ ਜਾਣਕਾਰੀ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਫਿਰ ਹੀ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨਾਲ ਇਮੀਗ੍ਰੇਸ਼ਨ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਕੰਸਲਟੈਂਟ ਆ ਉਹ ਬੁੱਕ ਕਰਿਓ, ਤਾਂ ਕਿ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਕੋਲ ਹੋਰ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਕੁਐਸਚਨਸ ਆ ਉਹ ਵੀ ਨਾਲ ਦੀ ਨਾਲ ਹੀ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਵਾਸਤੇ ਆਨਸਰ ਕਰ ਸਕਦੇ ਆ। ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਵਾਸਤੇ ਅਸੀਂ ਇੱਕ ਹੋਰ ਨਵਾਂ ਸ਼ੋਅ ਹੋਰ ਇੱਦਾਂ ਦੀ ਜਾਣਕਾਰੀ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਆਉਂਦੇ ਰਹਾਂਗੇ। ਅਗਲੇ ਸ਼ੋਅ ਤੱਕ ਤੁਹਾਡੀ ਆਪਣੀ ਸੁੱਖੀ ਵੱਲੋਂ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਸਾਰਿਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਪਿਆਰ ਭਰੀ ਸਤਿਕਾਰ ਭਰੀ ਸਤਿ ਸ਼੍ਰੀ ਅਕਾਲ।